Hey guys, Andrew Sluder, pastor of Bible Baptist Church here in Asheville, North Carolina, coming to you with a video on who are the two witnesses of Revelation chapter number 11. Now, the two witnesses have been talked about, discussed, debated over for centuries now. We as Bible believers, of course, believe that this is a future event that is yet to take place. We believe that during Daniel's 70th week, the tribulation period, the 7 years where the Antichrist rules the earth, that there will be two witnesses that show up and they will wreak havoc on the system and kingdom of the Antichrist. In fact, in Revelation chapter number 11 and verse number 5, we find that if anybody tries to hurt these two witnesses, fire literally comes out of their mouth and devours them. Now, the discussion has been, though, who indeed are these two witnesses? Who are these two hellfire-breathing preachers that show up during the tribulation period? There have been theories from, Enoch to John the Baptist. There have been all sorts of Melchizedek. I've heard all sorts of theories and ideas. But I'm going to give you what I think is solid evidence that the two witnesses are indeed Elijah and Moses. Elijah and Moses. I'm going to give you three main reasons why I think that is the case, okay? The first reason is in Malachi chapter number 4. In Malachi chapter number 4, the last book and the last chapter of the Old Testament, we find that Moses and Elijah are both mentioned. In Malachi chapter 4 and verse number 4, it says, "Remember ye the law of Moses, my servant, which I commanded unto him in Horeb for all Israel, with the statutes and judgments." Verse number 5, "Behold, I will send you Elijah the prophet before the coming of the great and dreadful day of the Lord." So from those two verses we glean that Moses summarizes the law and Elijah summarizes the prophets. And we understand that is exactly what the Bible speaks of, is in reference to the Old Testament coming to an end. In fact, the Bible says the law and the prophets were until John, but now is the kingdom of heaven preached. So I believe that is one of the first evidence of Elijah and Moses being the two witnesses. Not only that, but in Matthew chapter number 17, at the Mount of Transfiguration, we find that Jesus Christ takes Peter, James, and John up into a high mountain, and the Bible says he was transfigured before them. And we find out that this transfiguration, when Jesus was transfigured, is a picture of the second coming of Jesus Christ in 2 Peter chapter number 1. 2 Peter chapter number 1 and verse number 16 through 18. 2 Peter chapter number 1 verses number 16 through 18. We find that the Mount of Transfiguration is a picture of the second coming of Jesus. Well, guess who shows up at the Mount of Transfiguration in Matthew 17? It is none other than Moses and Elijah. They are talking with Jesus on the Mount of Transfiguration. Another interesting note about Moses and Elijah being at the Mount of Transfiguration, of course, Elijah is caught up in a chariot and never dies. And Moses, the Bible says in Jude chapter number 1, obviously, because Jude only has one chapter, but Jude chapter number 1, that Michael, the archangel, is disputing over the body of Moses. They're fighting over the body of Moses. And we understand that Moses was buried by the very hand of God, and nobody knows where God buried him. So there's strong evidence to believe that the body of Moses was hidden by God and fought over by between Michael and the devil, because Moses was going to be resurrected and be used again in the end times. So that is the second evidence that Moses and Elijah are the two witnesses in Revelation chapter number 11. But here is what I believe is the strongest evidence, and it's found in Revelation chapter number 11 and verse number 6, Revelation 11:6. Look at what it says there if you have a Bible. "These have power to shut heaven, that it rain not in the days of their prophecy, and have power over waters to turn them to blood, and to smite the earth with all plagues as often as they will." So there we find that the first thing that these witnesses are going to do is they're going to shut up heaven, that it rain not for the days of their prophecy. And if you're a Bible student, you understand that the two witnesses prophesy for 1,260 days. That's 3.5 years. Well, listen to what the Bible says in James chapter number 5. James chapter number 5 and verse number 17. Elias was a man subject to like passions as we are, and he prayed earnestly that it might not rain, and it rained not on the earth by the space of 3 years and 6 months. There's 3.5 years, folks. So Elijah, or Elias as the New Testament called him, that correlates perfectly with him. But not only that, but the Bible says that they have power to turn waters into blood. Well, that is exactly the first miracle or plague that Moses did to the Egyptians when he's trying to deliver the children of Israel out of the land of Egypt. And not only that, but it says that, and to smite the earth with all plagues as often as they will. So we find there that they cause it not to rain, Elijah, and they smite the earth with plagues, and the specific plague that's mentioned is turning the water into blood, which is the first plague done by Moses to the Egyptians, signifying that this correlates with the 10 plagues of Egypt. Moses and Elijah, the law and the prophets, they're coming before the day of the Lord. Now, folks, this is not a point of contention where I'd fall out with anybody, but I do believe that the Bible strongly points to and teaches that the two witnesses of Revelation are indeed Elijah and Moses. But the bigger question is, are you going to be here when they prophesy, or are you going to be out of here before the tribulation starts? And folks, I'm glad that I'm saved. I'm born again. I'm going to heaven. And if Jesus were to come tonight, I would be going, and not a hair of my head will ever see one iota of the tribulation. Hope this has been a blessing to you. God bless you is my prayer.